The night was so cold it felt sharpened, slicing through layers of clothing and settling deep in the bones as the Ukrainian unit lay motionless along the tree line. Frost clung to broken branches and rusted fence wire, glittering faintly under a moon half hidden by low clouds. No one spoke. Breathing was slow, measured, controlled, each exhale carefully angled away from optics that might catch the faintest mist. Ahead, the road curved through open farmland, a ribbon of cracked asphalt bordered by abandoned tractors and the skeletal remains of houses shelled months ago. It was the kind of place armies passed through without thinking, and that was exactly why it had been chosen. Hours earlier, drones had confirmed the movement, a Russian armored column pushing forward with confidence, believing the sector weakened, believing speed alone could break through. The Ukrainians had watched the live feed in silence, memorizing vehicle spacing, antenna types, turret behavior. Commanders marked invisible lines in their minds, kill zones measured not just in meters but in seconds. Everyone knew their role. The missile teams lay furthest forward, weapons already aligned, safety catches resting beneath gloved thumbs. Mortar crews waited farther back, coordinates written in grease pencil on frozen notebooks. Infantry squads were spread like a net, ready to tighten when the moment came. Now the distant growl of engines rolled across the fields, low at first, then steadily louder. Tracks rattled against road debris. Headlights flicked on and off, careless, confident. Through thermal sights, the vehicles glowed like slow-moving beasts, heat signatures pulsing steadily. The lead armored personnel carrier crept closer, its gun scanning lazily side to side, unaware that half a dozen optics were already centered on it. A quiet click moved through the line as safeties were disengaged. Hearts pounded, but hands remained steady. The first explosion shattered the night without warning. A missile streaked from concealment and slammed into the lead vehicle, tearing through armor in a violent bloom of fire and metal. Almost instantly, a second missile struck the rear, sealing the column in place. For a split second, there was silence, shock-freezing sound itself, then everything erupted. Russian soldiers poured from hatches, shouting, firing wildly into darkness that gave no answers. Engines revved uselessly as vehicles jammed against one another, trapped by wreckage and fear. Mortars began to fall with mechanical precision. The first rounds landed just beyond the road, forcing troops back into the open. The next walked inward, explosions thudding into the ground, flinging dirt, snow, and fragments of asphalt into the air. Radios screamed in overlapping panic, voices breaking as commands contradicted one another. Ukrainian drones hovered unseen above the chaos, feeding targets to gunners who adjusted calmly, almost coldly, as if on a training range. Small Ukrainian teams moved along the flanks, low and fast, boots barely crunching against frozen soil. They fired in short, controlled bursts, then shifted position before return fire could lock onto them. Every movement had been rehearsed, every angle anticipated. Smoke thickened, mixing with burning fuel, turning the road into a choking corridor of confusion. Russian troops tried to form defensive lines, but each attempt collapsed under sudden, precise fire from unseen directions. Within minutes, the confidence of the advance dissolved completely. Vehicles sat abandoned with engines still running, doors flung open, ammunition scattered where hands had dropped it mid-sprint. Some soldiers fled into fields, only to find themselves pinned by fire they couldn't locate. Others huddled behind wrecks that glowed with heat, making them perfect targets in thermal sights. Time stretched and compressed all at once. Seconds felt endless, yet the destruction unfolded with brutal speed. From their positions, the Ukrainians felt no triumph, only focus. This was not revenge or spectacle, it was necessity. Every destroyed vehicle meant fewer shells falling on their cities, fewer boots pushing deeper into their land. When the firing finally slowed, replaced by the crackle of burning metal and the distant thump of secondary explosions, the soldiers remained still, scanning, listening, waiting for any sign of movement. The ambush had worked exactly as planned, and in the frozen darkness, the road had become a hard lesson written in fire. Dawn crept in slowly, a thin gray light bleeding across the horizon and revealing the full scale of the destruction left behind. Smoke drifted low over the road, curling around burned-out vehicles like ghosts unwilling to leave. The once confident column now lay broken and scattered, metal twisted into unnatural shapes, tires melted into the asphalt, ammunition cooking off in dull pops that echoed across the empty fields. Ukrainian soldiers remained in cover, watching carefully, knowing that the most dangerous moment often came after the shooting stopped. Radios crackled softly as squad leaders reported status in clipped, controlled voices. No cheering followed, no celebration, only confirmations, coordinates, casualty checks. A reconnaissance drone dipped lower, its camera sweeping across the wreckage, pausing on bodies, on movement, on anything that might signal a counterattack. Somewhere in the distance, Russian artillery thumped blindly, shells landing far from the ambush site, angry but ineffective, like fists striking air. The Ukrainians had already shifted positions, leaving behind only silence and smoke. As the light grew stronger, small Ukrainian teams advanced cautiously toward the road. They moved in pairs, weapons raised, boots stepping carefully between shards of glass and jagged metal. Every vehicle was approached as if it were still alive, every shadow treated as a threat. A burned infantry fighting vehicle hissed softly, its armor split open like a wound, the heat still radiating outward. Inside, maps and documents lay scattered, pages fluttering in the cold breeze as if trying to escape what had happened there. One soldier paused to retrieve a dropped helmet, nudging it aside with his boot before continuing forward. Another crouched near a wrecked command vehicle, photographing serial numbers, antennas, anything useful for intelligence. This was how victories were measured now, not in captured ground alone, but in information, in denying the enemy clarity and momentum. The road itself had become a message, one that would travel far beyond this field. Suddenly, a shot cracked from the far end of the column. Instantly, everyone dropped, weapons snapping toward the sound. A wounded Russian soldier had attempted to crawl away, firing blindly in desperation. A short burst answered him, precise and final. Silence returned, heavier than before. The Ukrainians waited several long seconds, then continued, hearts steadying as training reasserted control. As they secured the area, evidence of the rushed advance became clearer. Vehicles carried extra fuel strapped carelessly to the sides, crates of supplies stacked without proper cover, suggesting urgency, perhaps even pressure from higher command. This had not been a probing attack, it had been a push meant to break through, to exploit what Russian planners believed was a weakened line. Instead, it had ended here, frozen in place by patience and preparation. Further back, Ukrainian medics tended to their own wounded. A young soldier sat on the ground, jaw clenched as a medic wrapped his arm, blood dark against white bandages. He said nothing, only nodded when asked if he could still move. Nearby, another soldier stared quietly at the road, eyes unfocused, the adrenaline finally draining away. Victory carried weight, and everyone felt it differently. By mid-morning, orders came through to withdraw. The longer they stayed, the greater the risk of enemy air or artillery finding the site. Teams began melting back into the landscape, leaving behind traps, sensors, and the unmistakable wreckage of failure. The road, once a path forward, was now a barrier, clogged, dangerous, unusable. As the last Ukrainian soldiers disappeared into the tree line, the ambush's true impact began to ripple outward. Russian units farther back halted their movement, uncertain, afraid of driving into the same invisible wall. Commanders demanded answers that no one could give quickly. Plans drafted with confidence hours earlier were suddenly worthless. Maps were redrawn, timelines erased. The battlefield fell quiet again, broken only by the wind and the distant rumble of war elsewhere. But the silence was deceptive. What had happened here would shape decisions far beyond this stretch of road. It was not just a tactical success, it was a psychological blow, a reminder that every advance could be a trap, every kilometer earned at a terrible price. And somewhere beyond the smoke and frost, both sides understood that the war had shifted, if only by a few crucial degrees. Far from the shattered road, the consequences of the ambush spread quietly but relentlessly, like cracks traveling through ice. In a reinforced command post miles away, Russian officers crowded around glowing screens, replaying fragments of drone footage and broken radio logs. The images were incomplete, angles wrong, feeds cutting out at the worst moments, but the conclusion was unavoidable. An entire push had been stopped cold. Not delayed, not slowed, broken. Voices rose, then fell into tight, controlled tones as blame searched for a place to land. Rezavedka failed. Communications collapsed. The enemy knew. The word trap was not spoken aloud, but it hung in the room all the same. Orders that had once been aggressive were now cautious to the point of paralysis. Units scheduled to advance were told to wait. Artillery was repositioned, then repositioned again. Engineers were summoned to clear routes that no longer felt safe. Every road looked suspicious, every tree line hostile. Speed, once the plan's backbone, became a liability. Momentum leaked away minute by minute, replaced by hesitation that no directive could fully erase. On the Ukrainian side, the mood was different but no less heavy. The soldiers who had carried out the ambush regrouped in a concealed staging area, faces streaked with soot and exhaustion. Weapons were cleaned methodically, movements automatic, hands still trembling slightly from adrenaline and cold. Someone passed around a thermos of lukewarm tea. No one spoke much. They had seen what their work had done, and they understood the cost on both sides. There was satisfaction, yes, but it was quiet, restrained, wrapped in the knowledge that tomorrow would demand the same focus all over again. Commanders reviewed the operation with clinical precision. Timings were analyzed, missile impacts mapped, drone feeds dissected frame by frame. What worked would be repeated. What almost failed would be fixed. There was no room for pride, only learning. Intelligence officers compiled reports that would move up the chain by nightfall, reshaping defensive plans across the sector. One successful ambush, multiplied by understanding, could save entire towns from bombardment. As evening approached, Russian artillery finally found the empty road. Shells crashed down, where the column had burned hours earlier, pulverizing wreckage that no longer mattered. The bombardment was furious, excessive, driven more by anger than strategy. From concealed Ukrainian positions miles away, observers watched the impacts through optics, noting patterns, recording data. Even this, too late and too wild, offered lessons. Civilians in nearby villages felt the tremors through their walls and floors. Some peered from cellars, others prayed in silence, unsure which side the thunder belonged to. By morning, they would hear the rumors, another advance stopped, another road turned into a graveyard of steel. Hope traveled strangely in wartime, fragile but persistent, carried by whispers and half-confirmed stories. As night fell again, Russian units pulled back to defensive postures they hadn't planned to occupy for days. Supply trucks rerouted. Commanders requested reinforcements that would take time to arrive. The offensive timetable, once neat and confident, now lay in pieces. Every delay allowed Ukraine to fortify, to reposition, to prepare the next unseen line. Under a sky thick with stars, Ukrainian sentries took up watch. Somewhere beyond the darkness, the enemy regrouped, recalculated, searched for answers. But for this night, at least, the land was still. The ambush had done more than destroy vehicles. It had stolen certainty, injected doubt, and forced a powerful force to look over its shoulder before every step forward. In war, such moments were rare and precious. They did not end conflicts, but they bent them, subtly and decisively. And as the cold deepened and the front settled into uneasy quiet, one truth lingered on both sides of the line. Nothing would advance the same way again, because somewhere out there, unseen and waiting, the trap might already be set.